Okay, am I all wired up here? Everybody can hear me? Sounds like it.
Yes.
Well, you'll be happy to know I drove through some rain coming up here. So our 11-hour drought has finally ended. So we should be in good shape. So, well, today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my history, where I'm coming from, how I got to where I am at right now. I'm going to talk about the corporate structure of medicine right now, or the cartels. That's not a bad term, actually. A little bit about traditional medicine and about global medicine, and then a little bit about the cash only, and then maybe a little bit about the Affordable Care Act, so which I think is still an experiment right now. So myself, I started out with a bachelor degree in technical communications at University of Minnesota because I thought that was very apropos to what I'd be doing. I fell in love with microbiology, so I went on to get a master's degree in medical microbiology at University of Minnesota, and actually worked in that field for a little bit. When I was the director of microimmunology and virology, that was a few years ago. It wasn't at Aurora. But then went back to medical school at University of Iowa. And while I was there, I thought I was going to be a ophthalmologist, but every time we were going rounds or doing a specialty, I would find something that nobody else had found, which is exciting, and I'd point it out to my staff, and I'd say, well, look, he's got this lesion on his leg, and he's like, it's not our job. We're here for this. Not our job. Somebody else's job. And I kept hearing that so much that I thought, well, God, whose job is it? You know, I want to be the guy who actually takes care of the whole person. So I actually ended up going into family practice, which takes care of before cradle to grave, and takes care of anything. And it's where the buck stops a lot of time. It's your gatekeeper and who's kind of watching over your whole health, which nobody really else does. They look at little parts of it. And from there, I just always knew there was a little bit more. And I stumbled onto, I was looking, and when I did it, it was very hard to find, but I found the Integrative and Holistic Medicine Society. And that literally opened up a whole new world for me. And I got in with a group of people that seemed to be the brightest people I'd ever seen in medicine, seemed to be the most forward-thinking, that seemed to be the most early adopters of new technology and weren't afraid to do that. And that kind of changed my whole direction. I went from there into medical acupuncture, and I went from there into the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, which are, they're very good at extracting money from you, but they also have a lot of good educational programs, and I've continued on there. So I either am or have been board certified in family practice and integrative and holistic medicine and anti-aging and functional medicine. And I found out there was a whole other way to do things out there besides the traditional model, which in a lot of ways never really made sense to me. I spent a stint in the Air Force and had a great time in the Air Force, got to do a lot of fun things, got to do a lot of work with the astronauts and the space shuttle, got to fly F-16s, and I'm a pilot, I'm plane crazy, so that was great. Came out of there and went to Aurora Health Corporation and spent 15 years there. And that was in Oshkosh, and found a lot of the frustrations with corporate medicine. I tried to introduce some of my integrative medicine procedures there, but when I want to use a lab that wasn't a traditional lab, I got told, well, gee, you're the only one out of 2,000 doctors that wants to use this lab, and we don't have an account with them, and we really can't do that. And I try to adopt some new technology, and it's like, well, okay, we'll run it up the flagpole, and well, 3 months later, well, we really can't do that. We don't have the resources, and if we did it for you, we'd have to do it for somebody else. And besides that, there was the peer pressure of, hey, Kevin, what are you doing? You know, you're kind of out of the norm here. And doctors get very nervous when somebody gets out of their little box. It makes them nervous. They get rashes and things, and they kind of put pressure on you to bring you back into the box. And that's not where I wanted to be. So I found it really very hard to do the kind of medicine that I wanted to do. And increasingly, there's pressure for production and to get patients in and get them out, because I can charge for each patient a lot more than I can charge for how much time I spend with you. So right now, your average interaction with a conventional doctor in the cartel world is either 7 or 8 minutes in this country. And all I can do in that amount of time is throw a pill at you. And we use 80% of all pharmaceuticals produced in the world in this country. So what the heck is wrong with the rest of the world that they only need 20% of all pharmaceuticals and we use 80%? And I used to say that this country was run by Monsanto and the drug companies. However, I was wrong. I found out a little while ago that Monsanto was owned by a drug company. So, yeah. So it's kind of scary. We have the best government money can buy. And we ought to be proud of that, I think. So, there were a lot of things in medicine that didn't make sense to me. And one thing that I remember we were told on graduation day from medical school was the president of the medical school got up and said, well, at least 50% of what we're teaching you is wrong and what we taught you. And that's probably the closest thing to the most accurate statement in medical school. It was probably more like 70%, actually. And some of that, it changes so rapidly. But doctors are traditionally very slow adopters. And some of those things just didn't make sense. And one was, well, if we give men testosterone, we're going to increase their risk of prostate cancer. And that's taught in every medical school in this country and probably in the world. I don't know. And I was, one of the gentlemen in A4M, who happens to be a urologist, was looking at the data, and he went, you know, every study refutes that and states that if we normalize a gentleman's testosterone and hormone, they actually have a lower incidence of prostate cancer. So where did this pearl of wisdom come from? And he went to his professors, and he said, where'd you learn that? And I said, well, I don't know. I was just taught that. And it took him 2 years of going back each step, and finally he found out where that pearl of wisdom came from. It came from one doctor in 1945 writing one article where he had given one patient a shot of testosterone, and that male, a year later, developed prostate cancer. So he decided that giving men, supplementing their testosterone, is a risk for prostate cancer. And that's where it came from. That's how it got taught in every cotton-picking medical school in this country. And the opposite is actually the truth. And I could go on with examples after example of that. Women's hormones, for example. When I was in med school, it was like, okay, a woman comes in, starts complaining about hot flashes, we give them hormones, all right? And then it was like, well, gee, we're hurting women. They're dying. They're not seeming to have the cardioprotective effects of hormones. Don't give them hormones, okay? Unless they're really bugging you, don't give them hormones. And then it's kind of settled back, well, you can give them hormones, but only for a couple of years. And it's like, wait a minute, we don't know what the heck we're doing. Well, we know what we're doing. We were giving women horse hormones. And the problem is women aren't horses. And the body knows. And the bad part is we know that, and it's still being done. Premarin is still being used in this country. And the body's not that dumb. It knows the difference between real hormones and not. But when you give bioidentical hormones, you get all of the benefits. And when you balance things, we're just talking before the talk about balance in life and balance in medicine. And that's where we need to go to. Heart disease is another one. If you talk to just about any cardiologist, it's cholesterol, cholesterol, cholesterol. Why'd I have my heart attack, doc? Well, your cholesterol's high. Well, 50% of people have heart attacks with normal cholesterols. And I actually sat down and was talking to one of the cardiologists I've worked with for many years, who I respect, and I said, well, what about CRP, and what about ferritin, and what about homocysteine, and the markers of inflammation for heart disease? And he said, well, and this is a true story, he said, well, they used to be sexy, but they're not sexy anymore. And I said, well, in my circles, they're not only sexy, but they're darn sexy. And traditional medicine is kind of catching on that inflammation might be a problem. They don't really know what to do with it. And their answer is to put everybody on a statin drug, which actually is absolutely the wrong thing to do for most people, and increases your risk of type 2 diabetes and a lot of things, a lot of problems. One of the things that I think we need to do in this country is look a little more globally at medicine. I think we're pretty egotistical, and we think that we do everything the best. So we don't really have to look beyond our borders to see if there's a better way to do things. An example is the statin drugs, which I'll bet a lot of people are on. That's Lipitor, atorvastatin, a lot of different drugs that I bet a lot of people in this room are on. Well, in Europe, if you prescribe a statin drug, you have to prescribe coenzyme Q10 with that. In Canada, if you buy a statin drug, it has a warning on the side of the package stating, caution, must be taken with coenzyme Q10, just like cigarettes have a warning in this country. In this country, I see person after person coming to me on statin drugs, and no one's ever talked to them about coenzyme Q10, and we just accept the fact that muscle fatigue and cramps and aches, they're all part of taking the drug. So be quiet and just put up with it. And it doesn't have to be. And coenzyme Q10 is so important for so many of the bodily functions. And if you do ask most docs in this country who's the best at medicine in the world, they'll puff up their chest and they're happy to tell you, well, be glad you live in this country because we're the best. And I think if you get in an accident on Highway 41, probably this is the best place in the world to be. I think our trauma services are very, very good. But traditional medicine, we're considered about number 16 in the world in medicine. We're number 50th in life expectancy. And we don't do it well. One of my patients, his mother-in-law is a Swedish physician who practices not too far from here. And she tells him all the time, she says, you Americans don't do medicine well. And I said, I want to meet that lady because she's absolutely right. We have a long way to go. And we need to stuff our egos a little bit and start looking at what the rest of the world is doing. With corporations, in my opinion, it's all about the money. And I don't care what the ads say, putting patients first. It's really all about the money. And that's what it comes down to. And I was, for the vast majority of the time I was at Aurora, I was in the management structure there. I was president for a number of years. We're in charge of over 100 physicians. And it's not the docs. The docs are for the people, but the docs are under constraints to produce more, to generate more revenue, to utilize certain services, to move people through. And like I said, the more people you see, the more revenue you can generate. And a lot of these systems have built such castles in different places that you just have to have a lot of revenue coming in. And I mean, they want a clinic in every town, and not every town wants a clinic or can support a clinic. And some that Aurora built have closed. And I'm not just picking on Aurora. I think it's just the one I'm most familiar with. But it is happening out there that they need this revenue, and that's become their driving factor. And I think they really lost point of what they're there for. If you look at health insurance, if I, in my shop, was going to accept insurance, first of all, the application procedure is very onerous and very time-intensive to apply to be one of their providers. And the big shops do it because they have to do it. The contract is definitely going to require a lot of lawyer interpretation and legal expenses. You have to agree to severe discounts in just about everything to be on the panel. And it would be very difficult for an independent provider to do that and do that well. If you came to me at Aurora, maybe for a wellness exam, my charge might end up on the bill being $250, and you might have $500 of lab work. So probably $750 if you get your bill. If you've ever looked at your insurance bills, it'll say, $750. And then it'll go labs, $500. Insurance will pay $74. And they write the rest off. And doctor, $250. Insurance will pay, $73. So you get that bill and you go, holy cow, $750. But Aurora might only get paid $140 for that whole thing. Now, part of the disgusting part of that is if you come in and you're paying cash, guess what you're paying? That's $750. And a bunch of us at Aurora really put up, and it was a fight. because we really felt that wasn't fair. And if Aurora is willing to accept $150 from the insurance company, why shouldn't they be willing to accept a significantly reduced charge if you're paying cash? And for a while, they actually got fairly good at it. The last time I dealt with them, that had slipped a lot. And I think they're still willing to give some kind of discount for cash, but it's not even close to what they accept from the insurance companies. And that's one of the things I really think is not very fair. I would need an extra personnel in the office just to do insurance. And the most expensive cost in my office is personnel, is the flesh and blood. That's what's going to cost me the most. And it is so labor intensive, and all your T's have to be crossed, all your periods have to be dotted just right. The dictations have to be letter perfect, or you don't get paid. Medicare, there was a time, I don't know, probably about 11 years ago or so, where they were denying every claim initially, or almost every claim that came in the first time. And let's say you did and this is probably pretty close to a true story, you do a $300 procedure, Medicare reimburses $74. Well, it could probably cost you $35 in staff time to submit that. So you submit that, and they deny it. So now you've got two choices, either to resubmit it or not to submit it at all again and just eat it. Well, it's going to cost you another $30 to $35 to resubmit it. So now you've got $70 of cost into submitting it, and postage and copying and all of that, and your reimbursement's going to be $74. So a lot of people just didn't resubmit. And of course, that's probably why they were doing it. I have a friend who's an ER doc who's very politically savvy in Illinois, and for a while in the hospitals there, they would pick on a hospital, and for 3 months they would find a reason just not to pay the Medicare bills. And then they'd move on to another hospital and find a reason, and he said they were just going around the area. And we're talking $7-8 million bills that were just being not paid. So that gets kind of scary. And if you're a little person, you can't really afford that. When you're open to government funds, you're also open to a lot of scrutiny, of people coming and scrutinizing what you're doing. Affinity health care systems just got, well, a little while ago, got fined $3 million because they got rid of some copiers and they didn't wipe the chips clean on those copiers. So there potentially might have been, maybe, if you knew how to get to it and how to extract it, some patient information in those copiers from something that had been copied in their lifetime. So $3 million is a pretty hefty fine for that. And one of the things with HIPAA compliance, which I am subject to, and I just spent $1,000 learning how to be compliant, but I'm telling you it's probably going to take me a year to get everything in place as perfect as I can to be absolutely compliant, because it's extremely difficult. But there are people that if they find a HIPAA violation and report it, they get to keep if that doctor is fined or that office is fined, they get to keep a portion of that fine. So there's a huge incentive. And then the office is regulating that, gets to keep the other part of the fine. So out of that $3 million, it might have been a janitor at Affinity that turned him in. I don't know. But he got probably a very healthy portion of that $3 million. And then the agency got to keep the rest of the $3 million. So it's a win-win situation. I kind of think it's a little of interest, though, in that kind of situation. So being cash only get a little bit of a target off my back. About 70% of what I do is treat chronic Lyme disease, which there's a huge controversy in medicine about, and a lot of doctors don't believe that that exists, number one. I use kind of non-traditional treatments and prolonged treatments because that's what it takes, and it happens to be an epidemic in this country. But that puts a target on my back too, because the standard is, well, 2 weeks of doxycycline and you're going to be fine. And I know where that comes from. I used to teach medical school, and I used to teach infectious disease doctors, and that's what I taught because that's what I got taught. And that's not going to do it. And I'll go there if you want, but I don't want to get too much into Lyme disease, but I do have my questionnaire that I use in the back, and if any of you think you might have Lyme disease, pick up that questionnaire and start filling it out, and that will tell you in pretty short order if you have Lyme disease or not, with some of the symptoms on there. By the CDC's own estimates, there's between 300,000 and 1 million cases a year in this country, and 30,000 are reported every year. So it's a huge problem, and we're right in the middle of it. But that puts a target on my back, and by avoiding the government monies, that helps put me a little bit below the radar on that. In green medicine, my approach to medicine is fivefold. Number one, my number one enemy is inflammation, because that's the biggest enemy of any of us. That's where almost all badness starts, whether it's dementia, it's heart disease, it's stroke, hypertension, cancers. It all starts with too much inflammation. Number two would be diet. And our diets in this country aren't very good. And some of it's the food choices that we have. The soils are depleted. We're having to dump chemicals on the crops. We're genetically modifying crops. I could go on and on about diet. We are what we eat, and we don't do a very good job of it in this country. Number three would be toxins, and I guarantee everybody in this room is toxic. It just depends on how toxic we are, but everybody here is lead and mercury toxic, me included. Sometimes that's a problem, and sometimes that isn't, but there's no vitamin mercury out there. And I would bet that about 95% of you have some mercury in your mouth as we sit here right now. That little silver filling in your mouth is 50% mercury, which is a biohazard out here, but when they put it in your body, the American Dental Association says, well, that's fine. It's not a problem. But guess what they have if they take that mercury out again? Now they got a biohazard again. There's no old dentist around anymore because they used to mix this stuff up in their palms. Seriously? And you've heard of Mad Hatter's disease? Well, yeah, they all died of mercury poisoning years ago. But the point that they're still using this stuff, that's the part that bothers me. They can't admit that it's bad because they'd have such a class action lawsuit on their hands that wouldn't quit. The next thing would be hormones. As we age, our hormone levels drop, and we just go, well, I'm sure almost everybody in the room has heard, well, that's okay, Bill or Mary, because you're getting older, or you're 60 whatever, what do you expect? I don't think so. We think that this frame that I'm in is supposed to last about 120 years. We think that's kind of the design limit, and if you really take care of yourself, we think that's where we all should be making it to. But unfortunately, we've invented too many good things to eat and too many good things to drink, and we've invented remote controls, and not many of us make it to our design limits. But the potential is there, so I don't buy into this, well, it's because you're X number of years old. The Affordable Care Act, that's a really interesting thing that's happening right now, to say the least. I would say before the Affordable Care Act, if we had an insurance representative here, he could pull out the tables and tell you how many of you in this room with a very high degree of probability are going to have a major illness in the next year. How many of you are going to live for 5 years? What the costs are going to be for supporting a group like this. So they have these tables that they've developed, and they know pretty much exactly how much money they're going to spend over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Well, now all the rules have changed, and they've got to accept all comers, which they've never had to do before. So now their tables aren't really that applicable. So everybody is guessing right now in the insurance industry, and I've talked to a few of them, and they're saying, well, we think this is what it's going to cost us, but we've never been here before, we really don't know. And that's a very uncomfortable position for them to be in. Because there is one reason for insurance companies to exist. You guys know what that is? To make money, yeah. People go, well, the insurance company isn't helping me, and I'm like, well, that's not really their job. You know, their job is to make money. And the compensation package for the CEO of United Health in Minneapolis, which is the biggest insurer in the country, anybody have any idea what that is? No. Oh, no. Oh, no. 1.6 billion. Yeah, 1.6 billion. Now I figured that out. I'd have to spend $374,000 a day. Now I fly airplanes. I can spend a lot of money in a little bit of time, but I think I'd be tired after about a week. And I don't, just think of what we could do if this poor individual could live on 0.6 billion a year and maybe put that extra 1 billion into the insurance industry to maybe help some people. That could help a lot of people instead of working really hard to deny claims for people. And I apologize, I'm a little cynical after 34 plus years in medicine, so I think it's well deserved though. So I think the Affordable Care Act is really an experiment. I think there are some good things about it, but I think that's pretty limited. I think it is, as we were talking earlier, spreading a lot of costs around. There's a lot of people in the system now that haven't been in the system, that aren't contributing very much to the system, and guess who's going to pay for those people? Yeah, I'm looking at them right now. Yeah. Supposedly it's going to cost $6 trillion to the government. That's one figure I've heard. That's a chunk of change too. I'm not sure where that's coming from. I think it is the big corporations and everybody out there is struggling right now to try and adapt and figure out how to deal with this system, which is the law, and they have to. And I think it is like a glacier right now. Even if a different administration gets in, I don't think you can stop it because there's been so many changes. It's in the state here. HIRSP, the high-risk insurance program for people, was a very good insurance. And they said, okay, December 31st, it's done. And they sent out letters to everybody. Everybody got canceled, Well, then come late December, well, guess what? Okay, now it's going on for 3 more months. Well, wait a minute, I had to have a different insurance by January 1st, and, now a lot of people have. It's just been a mess, and the rules keep changing, which I'm sure you're aware of, and that makes it difficult for anybody to try and keep up with. So I think it is, I've been worried for a long time that medicine in this country is going to collapse, and I think it's quite possible that this could be one of the straws that does break the camel's back. I mean, hopefully people will find ways to work around this and maintain the system and keep it working. But if they continue to cut Medicare, for example, some of the procedures right now, if you go in with a crushed vertebrae in your back, the kit to fix that vertebrae costs more than the Medicare reimbursement for doing the procedure. So you're paying for the privilege of operating on somebody's back, which of course goes bad. Guess what's going to happen to the doctor? They're probably going to get a lawsuit, and they're paying for the privilege of opening themselves up to that liability. So I don't have all of the answers, but I think that the type of medicine that I'm doing right now, I have received an overwhelming response in people. So many people are coming in saying, hey, I've got a $10,000 deductible. And it's going to cost me, whether I go to Affinity or Aurora or wherever, whatever clinic, and I want to choose the doctor I want to go see. And I want to have some time with that doctor, and I want to be able to express my concerns with that physician. So the deductibles are getting so high that is helping this type of medicine. I really can say I haven't had anybody complain. I really haven't. It's been very, very gratifying, and I think people are looking for alternatives right now. I think we're trying to think about health and taking some responsibility, and that is one of the best things about all of my patients is they don't come in and say, fix me. And I practiced in California for a while, and that was kind of it. It's like, okay, this is what I got. What you going to do for me? And down the street to the next doctor and say, okay. And they found a doctor that told them what they wanted to hear. And it was like, you fix me. And in my practice now, people come in and it's like, well, what can I do to fix myself? Because I don't fix anybody. Don't tell anybody that, because I charge for this. But, you have to fix you. And I think that the society is getting to the point where people are recognizing that they need to take some responsibility for their health. So, I'm going to try and quiet down here a little bit if I can. I'd be happy to entertain any questions that anybody has.
Just to run back a little bit to the dentistry with the fillings, what is your take on fluoride in the water? A little off topic, but...
Not off topic at all. Fluoride is a heavy metal. It's been banned in 83% of the European countries, okay? But who cares? We know everything that's best in this country, okay? The original study that started out fluoride in the beginning was done in two towns like, we'll say, Oshkosh and Fond du Lac. I think it was in Denmark. And they put fluoride in the water of one town for 3 years, and they didn't do anything in the other town for 3 years. Well, lo and behold, they had a 61% reduction in cavities in the town, let's say Fond du Lac, that they put fluoride in the water. And they went, this stuff is great, okay? It's wonderful. What they don't tell you is they had a 61% reduction in cavities in Oshkosh, too, that they didn't do anything to. So if you believe in the scientific principle, it wasn't the fluoride. It was maybe a new dentist in town. It was maybe better education. It was maybe better toothbrushes, something. The American Dental Association just did another study, and their spokesman came out and said, well, we reaffirmed that fluoride is very beneficial. And somebody said, okay, show us the data. And they went, no. So they attained the data through the Freedom of Information Act. No difference, all right? Phoenix has taken fluoride out of their water supply. Milwaukee is considering taking it out of their water supply. It is, any study that I have ever looked at, it is very, if there's a benefit, it's a very minor benefit. And the disgusting thing is that last week I'm reading one of my family practice journals, and it says now, the American Academy of Pediatrics is recommending that doctors treat their patients, their pediatric patients, with fluoride in their offices. Okay? That's the new standard. All doctors are supposed to treat these kids, all kids, with fluoride in the doctor's office. I'm like, man, I'm not a dentist, you know? So I think fluoride is a bad thing. And I try and avoid it on every chance I can. It's in medicines, it's in mouthwashes, it's in toothpaste. We are fluorided to death in this country.
So not just in the water, in general, stay away.
It's in general, stay away from it.
There's options for toothpaste that you can get.
There are plenty of options out there, and more every day. And be happy to talk about that if you want, but other questions?
Yeah, on some of these medical procedures, I've run across Dr. Linus Pauling, who died in '96, but he came out with Matthias Rath, a German doctor, and discovered how to cure CVD, or cardiovascular disease. In fact, these are the only people that ever got a U.S. government patent on a cure for CVD. And it's dirt cheap. It's just vitamin C and levothyroxine in the proper amounts, in a molecular fashion. And I was wondering if you were aware of the CBD process and Pauling's therapy.
Well, you bet. Linus Pauling won a Nobel Prize for his work with vitamin C. Vitamin C is very anti-inflammatory. It's very safe. It's non-toxic. And I think when you obtain high levels, you can do a lot of wonderful things. I've given people IV vitamin C. I've heard of doses up to 60 grams in one sitting. Now, you would have to take a semi-load of vitamin C to get that orally because it's not that well absorbed, unfortunately. And vitamin C IV is just not that really available. Again, it's getting back to inflammation. What you're talking about is dealing with inflammation. And I think it's a little more complicated than just those two things. Like vitamin D. Everybody in this room ought to be on vitamin D, okay? At least 5,000 milligrams. And I will actually, international units, at least 5,000. Yep.
Oh, I'm only taking 1,000.
And actually, I was at Aurora, and I forgot to tell you this story, but this is the main reason why I jumped ship. And I happened to be president at the time, so it wasn't that they didn't like me, but the vice president, who I'd worked with literally butt to butt for 12 years, and he went on to administration in Aurora. He came to me one day and he says, Kev, he says, you've got 18 partners in family practice here. And I'm like, yeah, I know. He says, well, you put the fewest people in the hospital, you write the fewest prescriptions of any of your partners, and you have the shortest hospital stays. And I said, doing a great job, huh? He's like, no, you're not making us enough money. And I went, but you hired a physician, and I think you got one. And apparently you don't want one. And I mean, that's a verbatim conversation, you know, crossed my heart. And that's when I decided, okay, this is not a venue where I can practice the type of medicine that I want.
I take these surveys or where we're rated 15th and I've seen 40th behind Puerto Rico, behind Cuba. Sure. I take them with a big grain of salt because when you start looking you know, they like nature and they eat healthier foods maybe, but if you don't have a vibrant private economy, and I'm talking, I think a big problem in this country is the cronyism that we're seeing now with Obamacare. It's terrible. But if you don't have a vibrant private economy, you will see what I see all the time in Sweden. There isn't money to treat the old people. My friends' parents are dying of old age at 82, but they had a good life, so that's okay. Their children my age say. And all the unwanted fetuses that are, you know, have some genetic problem are aborted because the government is not going to pay $1 million to take that child through life. And so they're smug too. They think that we just are all about money. But money has actually helped us do good things, and money has helped us do bad things. So I don't want people to think that Europe is so great and we are so bad, because I still, having seen a number of countries, I still say we are the best, but we're unfortunately going downward.
Well, I think there's a couple of good points that you raised there. And first of all, rationing of health care, it's about that far away. Okay? Yeah. You're how old? Yeah. You need what? Okay. No. Sorry. You're not going to get that hip replaced. You're not going to do this. I think we are about that far away. I think finances have a huge part to do with it. But the one big disappointment with me and just about every other doctor that I know of is that the Affordable Health Care Act did not attack probably one of the main reasons why health care is so expensive in this country. And that's tort reform, and that's get the lawyers off our backs. And I guarantee if just about any of you go into the ER right now and you banged anything, you're going to get some radiation of some kind. Probably a CT, or if you bang your head, you're going to get an MRI. Those are very expensive. And the doctors, we're sitting there going, hey, order CT. Does he need it? No. You know, but if I don't do it and I miss that 1 in a million chance, I'm going to be up on that stand and a lawyer is going to be dragging me through the coals and saying, sign the check here. So that's one of the big places that we need to go for reform. So,
an 18th century chemist said the difference between a remedy and a poison was the dose. So when you're talking about heavy metals, you'll find heavy metals on your vitamin pills. So it's important. In regards to fluorine, it's a halogen, not a heavy metal.
Okay.
Let's pretend that I just accepted as a patient. Tell me what I would go through, how much it would cost, how it would relate to all of the things that might happen to me and I'm currently under the advantage of Medicare.
I'm not quite sure that you mean in my clinic, or you mean, okay. Well, I'm in the process of opting out of Medicare, all right? But I will probably go to the point, I'm a non-acceptor right now, all right? But when I opt out, that would mean that you cannot submit any charges to a secondary insurance or to anyone. You have to pay what my charges are. I will probably be an ordering and what they call an ordering and referring provider, which means that if I order labs on you, being a licensed physician in the state of Wisconsin, you could get those paid for, okay? And labs get very expensive very quickly. And people that don't have insurance, for example, we usually do the labs in my office because it's about, literally, it's about 1/10 the cost of getting labs done at one of the big boxes around. There's pretty big markup on labs generally.
If I need a hip replacement.
Well, that I don't deal with anything like that. So, but yeah, hip replacement's probably going to cost, I'm guessing now, I wouldn't want to be quoted, but I'll bet you're looking at $20,000 or more.
And it would not be covered under Medicare.
Well, it is currently, but...
Well, that's what I mean, if I switch to you.
Oh, well, I wouldn't be doing the hip replacement. I'm not an orthopedic surgeon. So that would be under another doctor, okay?
Would you refer?
I could refer, but then that doctor would be the doctor that would be doing that, yeah.
But again, I would have no insurance for that.
No, if that provider was an accepting provider, then you would get,
Okay.
But I'm not, okay? But I'm not doing the procedure.
So what you provide is only what your skills provide, but it doesn't affect me in all the other things that might happen.
Right, exactly. And I don't do primary care per se anymore. I will do health maintenance, hormones, balancing, diet education, detoxification, but not strictly primary care. And a lot of what I do is the Lyme disease, which most insurance companies, as soon as they hear Lyme disease, they go, oh, all we have to pay for is 2 weeks of doxycycline because that's what the guidelines are. So, airborne.
I'm interested in what your thoughts are on all of this over-the-counter food supplements and whatnot. You're bombarded all over the place, Walmart and over the internet, you name it. Personally, I don't think it's worth what you're paying for. I like to have your take on it.
Thanks for your service, by the way. Even if it was Army, I'm a little biased, but hey.
Who I send?
It all depends if I was still in the plane or floating down.
That's right. I know whose planes he used. Anyway, one of the things that I see a lot of people coming in on, and for example, B vitamins, for example, one of the things I look at on everybody is homocysteine, because homocysteine is an inflammatory marker of your blood vessel lining. And that turns out to be the biggest organ in your body. And when I was in med school, it was like, well, it's a hydraulic pipe to get from blood from here to here, and it's got damn muscles around it, and if they tighten up, you've got high blood pressure or a headache, and that was about it. But now they're going, holy cow, that these lining of the blood vessels, you've got between 60 and 90,000 miles of these things in your body, and that's the biggest organ in the body. Well, when that's high, you have inflammation there. That's not a place where you want inflammation, because so goes that, so goes you, with high blood pressure, stroke, blood clot, or whatever. And B vitamins treat that. But I see tons of people coming in on B vitamins, and they don't work. Their homocysteines are high. And I'm pretty well convinced that about 85% of the supplements you buy out there aren't very good, and I don't know why. I don't know if what they say is in there isn't in there, or if it's in I know in a lot of cases it's in a form. I think that they're using supplements right now. And I can see we got one person. I can see at the corporate meeting. Joe, we don't have a probiotic. I want a probiotic by next week. Okay. Well, next week we've got a probiotic on them. Does that mean any good? Not really. And repeatedly, I have people bring in what they're on, and we compare them against a good high quality. And almost always, when you buy a high quality, you're getting much more for your money, and it's what they say is in there is in there. And there's some very reputable companies right here in the state.
How do you know good quality? I get a bottle.
And I think you've got to be careful. Good place, and if you buy two and get one free, I would say that's probably not a good thing. I'm a huge believer in fish oil, and everybody here ought to be on fish oil too, but I used to joke you don't want them getting the oil from the Chernobyl fish. Well, just heard that the tuna off the west coast now are showing increased radiation levels from Fukushima. So it's not so funny. You almost need somebody that does this to help you go through, but there's a very good store not very far from here, right across the 41, that has a very good, knowledgeable people that can help you with that too. So.
What brand of fish oil do you recommend?
I personally think Ortho Omega is the best. I also like Carlson, and I like Nordic Natural.
I work with Dr. He uses Zoll, which is very high quality.
Okay, and there's others out there. I'm not saying these are, but these I've looked at the manufacturers. I know where they get their fish. I know how they process it. You don't burp like a seal and burp fish all day long, because then it got rancid somewhere along the line. So, somebody over here.
Is there a connection you do between vaccines and rising level of autism?
Okay, if you didn't hear that, the question was, is there a connection between vaccines and the rising level of autism? Boy, that's a hot potato in conventional medicine. There was just an article I read where the CDC, they were saying the CDC has covered up a lot of data that might indicate there is a connection. Thimerosal was in vaccines for a lot of years, which is mercury. I tell you, I can't count the number of mothers that have come in and said, my kid was fine until I got that vaccine, and boom. I personally think there is anecdotally. I don't think it's ever been proven scientifically. I am medium, middle of the road with vaccines. I think we're overloading our kids right now at ages even before their immune systems fully develop. I'm in favor. My grandkids have gotten vaccines, but they've been very selective and timed. And I think I've kind of prioritized them for them and for our daughter. But I think there probably is a connection.
If I could, Stan, I think one of the big questions that we're faced with in terms of our community in particular is how do we get you and other doctors to come together and to begin to talk about the kind of medicine, not only that you're practicing, but I'll go back to the Dr. Stone, I believe it was, who was on Skype, Smith, in Oklahoma City. Knee surgery down there. The New American magazine, which just came out yesterday, is all the different medical costs in Oklahoma City compared to what I think he was around for knee surgery. How work with our
probably a good way to finish. It's. I think that it is happening. I think that every integrative, every anti-aging conference I go to, I see the numbers swelling and swelling and swelling, and doctors going, the current system isn't working well for me. I need something else, and more are going into this type of medicine and doing what I'm doing. And I think it's like anything else. If you don't buy the peanut butter in the grocery store, they're going to stop carrying it. And as consumers speak. And I think it's more you guys that are going to change it than the doctors. I think it has to be both ways. Well, thanks for your attention today.
Nothing to add.
Okay.